We're going to start Matthew 28. This is the last chapter in Matthew, so next week we're going to start the Chosen. If anybody wants to, we'll probably be in there because that's where I got the TV set up in there. Yeah, we'll make it a little bit more amiable to sit in there, but should be able to hear it and see it a little better than what seeing it up on the screen. Hopefully. So as we go to chapter 1 through 3, in the end of Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for the angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat upon it. His countenance was like lightning, and his raiment was white as snow. Now, this is, of course, after his death. Last week, Jesus was buried. Joseph of Arimathea buried him before the Passover time, okay? Well, here it says Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre. Now, if you go back and read Mark, Luke, and John, this other Mary is Lazarus' sister, because in one of the other books it names her Mary of Bethany. Well, Bethany was where Mary and Martha and Lazarus was. So these are the only two women that stayed there to the very end. Watch them put him in the tomb, roll the stone, and then they left. And then they're the first ones to come back of the disciples. Now, in between time, nobody was there. Okay? There wasn't anything at this time. They were the last to leave and first to come back, according to Matthew. So, it says they came to finish the preparation of Jesus' body, which was cut short for the Sabbath. Well, that's what Luke tells us. Well, that would be fine, but I don't think two ladies is going to be able to roll a stone away. So I think they kind of added that a little bit afterwards. To either they're trying to get somebody else to come back there and help them or something. So it says, after the Sabbath on Sunday, which was the first day of the week, they came to the tomb, fully expecting to find the dead body of Jesus. Matthew's the only one tells us that there is an earthquake that happened at this time. There was an earthquake when he died, and there was an earthquake when he was resurrected. Okay, this probably is what the resurrection was.
I didn't realize there was two.
Yeah, this is a second earthquake. Matthew's the only one that mentions this. Okay.
Wow.
So the other writers don't mention this at all. So we could see that it happened, and the earthquake did not cause the stone to roll away, though. Even though it was an earthquake, it shattered. Now, it could have been what they call an aftershock. Okay, once you have an earthquake, it's a couple of days later. Usually they happen right away, but it could have been an aftershock. It says it was a shaking or a commotion. Probably the word means no more than confusion among the guards by the angel's appearance. Now, it's a little bit out of kilter because we don't know that there's guards there. Okay, I said there was nobody there because it's not mentioned. But we'll get to that in just a minute, because there was people there. We'll see here in just a minute. And when the ladies get there, then the stone rolls back. An angel of the Lord comes down, and he rolls the stone back. And it says his countenance was like lightning, and his raiment white as snow. So that is just something, again, whenever people see angels or anything, it's an awesome experience that they just can't explain and can't hardly describe. And it happened so much, I'll tell you a little ahead of time, we haven't seen it. When that angel appeared, the guards that was there guarding the tomb fainted. these Roman legionnaires, hardened soldiers, fainted. Okay? It's the only thing that we knew what's happened. Okay, Brother Epperson, you want to read through 4 through 6, and we'll see that?
And for fear of him, the keepers did shake and became as dead men. And the angel answered and said unto the woman, Fear not ye, for I know that you seek Jesus, which was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen as he said. Come see the place where the Lord lay.
Okay. So the angel scared those legionnaires, the keepers, okay, that we'll find out in just a few minutes, that they were set in order to protect the tomb because they thought that their keeper, the other disciples, would come and get Jesus because he had already said, I'm going to come again in 3 days. I'll be raised alive. Said these Roman guards were responsible for guarding the tomb. The angelic presence made these professional soldiers tremble and faint. It doesn't say anything about him drawing a sword or even having spoken to the keepers, but the presence of perfect purity overawed these rough legionnaires. The resurrection of Christ is a subject of terror to the servants of sin and a subject of consolation to the sons of God, because it is proof of the resurrection of both, the one to shame and everlasting contempt, the other to eternal joy. So what is good, for one is powerfully bad for the other. It's not at all. But the message was, he's not here. It said, who are you? Fear not, for I know that you are seeking Jesus, which was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen. He said, and he told them to come and see where the Lord lay. They were the ones that went in there and saw them right before the stone was closed. They were the ones helping Joseph of Arimathea, prepare him as best they could before the Sabbath. They had to hurry. Now this is the first resurrection. There's a difference between resurrection and resuscitation. Lazarus, he was resuscitated. Why? Because he died. The ones that were thrown in with the body of Elijah, and they come alive, but they died. They were resuscitated, but they died. Jesus is the first of the resurrection. Resurrection isn't just living again, it's living again in a new body. Said we should also say that Jesus still is risen. It's one of the things that the Left Behind series, that's the catchphrase that they have. He is risen. So he tells them, come see where the Lord lay. The stone was not rolled away to let Jesus out. John tells us that Jesus in his resurrection body could pass through material barriers. We'll see that later on as we read through John. So that wasn't something that bothered Jesus. He could go right through it. But it was opened up to show people that he was no longer there. His body was no longer there. It says these women were grateful that the angel had told them to see the place where they laid him. It should have been enough to merely hear the testimony of the angel, but he gave them free rein. Go in. They were eyewitnesses that he was not there. He was gone. Angel could have told them, but they didn't. Okay, Iris, you want to read 7 and 8 for us?
And go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead, and behold, that he goeth before you into Galilee. There shall ye see him. Lo, I have told you. And they departed quickly from the sepulchre. However you say that.
Burial place.
Sepulchre.
Sepulchre.
With fear and great great joy and did run to bring his disciples word.
Okay. So they were excited to hear that he was risen. He was no longer dead. And the angel also told him he is going ahead of them to Galilee. Excuse me. There you shall see him. And he says, lo, I've told you. Now, Matthew, he leaves out some other sightings of Jesus in Jerusalem. They happened before he got to Galilee, or the disciples did. Matthew's just highlighting certain aspects. Was Matthew there? No, he wasn't there. It said Mary Magdalene and Mary of Bethany, or the other Mary. So that's who's telling the story, and Matthew is writing down exactly what they told him. Okay, this doesn't mean that Matthew didn't catch some of those others. He wasn't at the, could have been. He could have been at the other meetings where they saw Jesus, but he just didn't write that down. He told them what Mary told him. Okay, and that's what he wrote down. A lot of people get upset that every one of the Gospels is not exactly the same. Well, I don't want it the same, because it's from 4 different viewpoints. As Brother Epperson said the other day, Matthew's the Hebrew side, the Jewish side. Mark was actually from Peter, a lot of people think. His interpretation. Mark wasn't a, quote, one of the 12 disciples. He was one of them that followed him, and he was probably very young, so he probably saw a lot of this, but he wasn't in the inner circle. So they think it was Peter and maybe some others that was in there that was talking to Mark. Luke wasn't with them at that time that we know of. Luke's not mentioned until after the resurrection. He's mentioned, he tells his story. Here again, he's probably getting it from Mother Mary, because we hear the history of how Jesus grew up, a little more, into it than what the others had. That's where we hear about the shepherds. That's where we hear about it. And then John, he's telling it more as a story. Okay? More to the Gentile side, if you want to say it that way. His is not specific. He doesn't go down through like Mark or Matthew did and said, okay, this is the lineage of Jesus. Or Luke, this is the lineage of Jesus. He didn't get into that. He is more, he writes things on a bigger perspective. He wasn't really concerned. He went all the way back to he didn't care. He went all the way back to the first, in the beginning, just like Genesis did. He went back to the very, very first. So we see these, as they're going through here, Matthew is imparting what he thought was important. Now, it doesn't mean, ever again, as we get on later in John, when we read John, John tells us, I couldn't write all that happened with Jesus. That's what he basically said, because there's so many things, he just couldn't write everything down. Even though he was the longest living, and he lived, 90 plus years, I can't write. We was talking the other day, we went to Israel in April, and it seems like it's been years since we've been. I was trying to remember some of the people's names that we went with, and I don't, it's the first time I met those people, many of them, so I was having a hard time of who was whose family. I knew these were families. I asked Darla, and she said, well, let's think, and we kind of went back through it. But that's, you can't remember everything. Darla will remember several things, and I'm like, was I there? I guess I was.
I think I was.
She remembered, and then I'll remember, she'll say, well, where did we do there? And I say, well, don't you remember? I don't know. I must have slept through that. We all have our own things.
It's just like a family.
It
There's
is.
3 of us raised, and we were just, stair-step.
Right.
But yeah, we would get together sometime and talking, and Billy would tell us something, or Margie, and I'm thinking, I don't remember that.
Yeah, we each have our own interpretation. We each live our own life and we see what's important to us. And that's what Matthew had written down. So there's really not a problem with it. It's just a problem with some people that they think things ought to be just so and so, and it's not. Okay, Bertha, you want to read 9 and 10 for us?
And as they went to tell his disciples, behold, Jesus met them, saying, All hail. And they came and held him by the feet and worshipped him. Then said Jesus unto them, Be not afraid. Go tell my brethren that they go into Galilee, and there shall they see me.
Okay. So they went back. The angel had told them to go tell the disciples. And so as they were heading back that way, Jesus met them there. Now, you're talking about King James English, and it says all hail. What would that be in today's language?
Everyone.
Give an honor.
Yeah, it's hey, how y'all doing? He meets him on the road. That's what you do, don't you? Hey, howdy. You know, it's more. Yeah, it's giving him honor, but they are. He's expressing to them. It's him saying it. Hey, it's me. And they are just, they wasn't expecting it. They're going down the road wondering what's going on, telling, wow, he's risen again. And he said, how y'all doing? And it just startles them. They came and held him by the feet and worshiped him. As soon as they saw who it was and they knew it was Jesus, they started worshiping him because he had fulfilled what had been said. He was the Son of God. So he tells them again, just like the angel did, don't be afraid, but go tell my brethren, so they'll go to Galilee, and there they shall see me. What's one thing that stands out from this? He said, go tell my brethren. He didn't say, go tell them stupid people that left me when I got crucified. He wasn't harsh. Here again, it's an endearing. Go tell my brethren. What did he say right before he gave up the ghost? He looked to John and he said, here's your mother. You take her, basically, and my brethren. That's what he said. Even in his dying wish, he was releasing them from that burden of having they'd run away. He told them, you're going to run away. There's nobody I'm going to be, humiliated. And they wouldn't believe him. But now it's kind of like, no, it's okay. It's okay, guys. Go and meet me in Galilee. I'm going to be there. And of course, they'd been a lot in Galilee, so they knew pretty much where he was wanting to go. This is the first time that Jesus called him by his name, it says here. Well, it is in Matthew. If you go back, the other books, I think it's Luke or John, tells them about, it's John, calls them brethren right there at the last. Now we kind of go back. The guards have fainted. They wake up. The stones roll back. He's gone. They couldn't fulfill what they were supposed to do. Okay? They were supposed to keep him in the grave, but that didn't happen. So it says, now when they were going, behold, some of the watch came into the city. That's the people that was watching them. And showed unto the chief priest all the things that were done. And when they were assembled with the elders and had taken counsel, they gave large money unto the soldiers, saying, say ye, his disciples came by night and stole him away while we slept. And if this comes to the governor's ears, we will persuade him and secure you. So they took the money and did as they were taught. and as this saying is commonly reported among the Jews until this day. So the soldiers, if you don't do your duty on job, you probably get court-martialed. You probably get in the brig. But back then, they were supposed to watch, and they would probably be killed because they did, try to. They couldn't. There was no way they could control it. But they went back and told them. Now, if you remember, he went before Pilate, and Pilate had already given him some of his soldiers to take and to crucify Jesus, and he told them, go and secure it with what I've given you. Remember, we talked about that last week. These are the same guys, all right? Same legionnaires, same Romans. So they messed up, and they went back and told the Sanhedrin what had happened. How much does this hold water?
Oh, not much.
Well, they said, his disciples came by night and stole him away while we slept. Do you know anything that's going on when you're sleeping? How would they know it was his disciples? How would they know? The stone wasn't rolled away when they were there. It was rolled away when the angel came. Of course, they're not going to say that because that just, scares them. That they told them what had happened. And they said, oh, don't tell them that. Whatever you do, don't tell them that. So it was really silly for them to say that because it just doesn't add up. But they went ahead and told them that anyway. They gave them a large sum of money. We don't know how much it was, but it's enough to convince them that they could be saved because they weren't really reporting to Pilate at this time. Pilate had given them to the Sanhedrin, to the high priest. So they were reporting to the high priest. So if the high priest didn't tell them, Pilate, that they, were sleeping on the job, they could tell them, no, that wasn't right. They were okay. They did their job. It just doesn't make sense. But still, yet, this is still reported. It was reported when Matthew wrote this down. That's what they said. The disciples came out around this time and stole him away so they could fulfill his promise. So it says, to believe this, we have to believe all the soldiers were asleep. All the soldiers violated the law of death of the Roman military against sleeping on the watch. All the soldiers slept so deeply that none of them were awakened by the work and exertion and noise necessary to roll away the stone. All the soldiers were so soundly asleep, yet they knew who did it. That's just the way the guy Clark says, here's a whole heap of absurdities. It just doesn't work that way. And we talked about last week, some people believe that he just swooned. He didn't die, and they put him in the grave, and he came out on his own. Some people, suggest that people stole him. His followers were hallucinating after they saw his resurrection. All these different things. Says and this is Spurgeon. I suppose, brethren, that we may have persons arise who will doubt whether there was ever such a man as Julius Caesar or Napoleon Bonaparte. And when they do, when all reliable history is flung to the winds, then, but not till then, may they begin to question where Jesus Christ rose from the dead. For this historical fact is attested by more witnesses than almost any other fact that stands on record in history, whether sacred or profane. So we see that there's too much history here, too many witnesses. So, and then it goes on to the story. You ask me how I know he lives. He lives. He lives. The song. He lives inside my heart. But that's not the best way to prove Jesus lives. He lives because the historical evidence demands that we believe in the resurrection of Jesus. If we can believe anything in history, we can believe the reliable, confirmed testimony of these eyewitnesses. Now, Matthew jumps to Galilee. There are several other places that Jesus is seen, but Matthew doesn't report on that. Read 16 and 17 for us, Brother Emerson.
Then the 11 disciples went into Galilee, into a mountain where Jesus had appointed them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted.
Okay. So this is most likely the same mountain where was appointed. That's also where Peter, all the disciples was there at that time. It's in the northern part of Galilee. So this was very familiar to them. And of course, Judas wasn't there with them, so it's just the 11. And he doesn't tell us about, like I said, all the others. But they worshiped him. It says the meeting would be somewhat familiar haunt, only imperfectly recorded in the Gospels. This wasn't the first meeting, but it was an important one. At this meeting, they received their commission. Now, the others don't tell us. Matthew is the one that tells us this. And it tells, again, that some doubted. And they say doubting is probably too strong a word for us. It means that they were unsettled, had a little.
They just weren't sure.
They wasn't sure
They
about
had
what
the
it is.
thought that might be sure, but yet they weren't so
Well,
sure.
He as he talks to them, this is where they become unsure, because he's telling them again what's going to happen to them. They haven't yet been empowered. They're going to be, but they haven't yet been empowered, and that's part of it too. Because the disciples, when Jesus sent the disciples out to go do the miracles, I'm sure there was some unsettlement. Well, I don't feel any different. He told us to go do all the things he did, and how can I do that? I don't feel different. A lot of times we go on our feelings, and it's not our feelings that we need to go on, because he told us that's what we need to go on.
It's kind of, I didn't learn anything different.
We're relying on our learning, and that's not what it should be. 18, 19, and 20.
And Jesus came and spake unto them, saying, All power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. Amen.
Okay. So this is what we call the Great Commission. It tells us that they should go out and teach the nations, not just all of them. I mean, not just the Jewish ones, but to teach the nations. Before he had started, his was mainly going to the Jewish people really late, the last three chapters that we read. He started branching out into the Gentiles, even though he actually did. He went to Samaria, he went to some other places, healed people, and gave them the word too. He was trying to get the Jewish people to realize. And the hardest ones was, of course, the priests, the Sanhedrin. They weren't buying it because they were so hard. They had 450 years of studying the word, that all the things that had happened. And anything that got out of that, it just upset them. That happens to us today. Because something happens out of the norm, and we don't like it, because it changes what we're doing, we don't like it. We think it's wrong, when it may not be wrong at all.
We try to reject it too.
Yeah, we try to reject it. One of the things that's interesting, also, all through here, Matthew relates Jesus. when he first started out, he didn't state what he's stating here. He says, all power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. When he first started out and Satan was tempting him, go back and read that if you want to, he wasn't claiming that. Satan was trying to tell him, I will give you that. The power wasn't given to him then, because he is all God and all man, but he had not earned that. After his resurrection, after his death and resurrection, he's reached the pinnacle where he can say this. Okay? All power is given unto me. And then he's telling them, go and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. Okay? Not so much the Ten Commandments. They knew the Ten Commandments, but he taught them it's about the heart. It's about what I am leading you to believe in everybody. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's the commandments that he gave them. Because he gave them this authority, they can do whatever they want to now. But that's what, it's kind of like somebody, when you are on a job and they gave you a new job to do that you've never done before, you're a little hesitant because you don't know exactly what the other person did before you, how they did it, or you may have if it had been their job. You have to do it the way you want to do it, okay? Because you want to do it right and everything. You may have a little bit different opinion of who that person is. So, well, that's the whole thing. There's 3 or 4 more pages, and it's all good. But that's the go ye therefore is the critical. We should take that to heart, that we should go also. He told his disciples to go, and we have to go also. And where does that go mean? It's go to your neighbors, go to your friends, go to whoever it may be, to tell them about Jesus and the.
Well, it said from the disciple, it says make disciples. Remind us that the disciples are made. Disciples are not spontaneously created at conversion. They are the product of processing involved other believers. This makes disciples is the powerful spreading Christianity. In other words, Jesus already chose individual people.
Mm-hmm.
They had to teach them to be disciples.
That's right.
They weren't just automatically created to
Well,
be
that's the same way today. When somebody becomes a new Christian, they have to be taught.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people like to take a bat and start beating them over the head with the Bible. You got to do this and you got to do that. No, you can't do that. You've got to teach like Jesus taught. And sometimes we don't take it very lightly when somebody starts pushing stuff on us. We have to learn from Jesus, and that's kind of what it means.
Show me the way.
Mm-hmm.
Teach me how.
Questions or comments?
Very good.
Well, it's a little shorter than last week, but last 2 weeks.
It's all right.
Appreciate everybody coming out.
We appreciate you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there a